You never find out how weak your water plan is when the taps are running, the weather is mild, and the power is stable. You find out when the air turns dry, the pressure drops, the grid starts wobbling, and every clever little water idea you saved in the back of your mind suddenly stops looking so clever. That is when this story matters. Most passive water systems sound strongest when somebody is explaining them.
The impossible.
Fog
The future
nets,
of sustainable
dew collectors,
technology starts
low-tech
here,
towers,
in the heart
mesh
of
panels,
Death Valley.
moisture traps. Some of them are real. Some are field-proven. Some available people for years. But many of them share one brutal weakness. They work best when the air already has enough moisture to give. And the places under the worst water stress are often the places where the air gives you almost nothing. That is why this MIT device is worth paying attention to. Not because it makes a great headline, not because it sounds futuristic, because it aims straight at the exact condition that ruins most passive water harvesting systems: dry air. According to the source behind this script, engineers at MIT published results in June 2025 for a passive water harvester designed to operate in desert air without electricity, without moving parts, and without external input beyond the normal day-night cycle. The prototype was then tested in Death Valley, California, under some of the driest ambient conditions in North America. That gives this story a real backbone. A named institution, a named mechanism, a field test, a stated output, a stated limit. So, the real question is not whether the idea is impressive. The real question is whether it belongs in a survival water plan or whether people are going to oversell it long before it is ready. And survival punisheth fantasy fast. One quick note before we go further. Some visuals in this video are AI-assisted illustrations designed to show real-world survival logic more clearly. The conditions, mechanisms, and limits we are talking about are real. The point is not fake realism. The point is useful clarity. Now, pulling water from the sky is not a new dream. Humans have been doing versions of it for thousands of years. First, with rain catchment. Then with ways of gathering fog, dew, and other forms of atmospheric moisture where direct water was scarce. That history matters, because it tells you the dream is sound. The weakness was never the dream. The weakness was always the conditions. In the right environment, passive water collection can be powerful. If you have steady fog, high humidity, good airflow, and favorable cooling conditions, simple systems can give you meaningful water with no motor, no fuel, and very little maintenance. That is why fog harvesting still matters. It is not a gimmick. It is a real option in the right climate. And that phrase matters more than almost anything else in this video, in the right climate. Because once the air gets too dry, the performance of many passive systems falls apart. According to the source, classic passive systems like fog nets and dew collectors share the same core limitation. They need high ambient humidity to function well, and when the air dries out, they stop producing useful amounts of water. That is the trap. The systems that look cheapest and simplest can become weakest exactly where water stress is worst. So, if your survival logic is built on a passive collector that only thrives when the air is already generous, then you do not really have a water plan. Water plan. You have a best-case water plan. Think about what that means in practical terms. A village on a foggy coast and a family in a dry inland valley are not facing the same water problem, even if both are worried about scarcity. One place may be surrounded by moisture that can be intercepted with simple mesh and patience. The other may be staring at air so dry that older passive tricks barely wake up. If you blur those two situations together, you start making bad decisions very quickly. That is one reason this story deserves a careful look instead of an excited one. The device is not impressive because it promises magic. It is impressive because it targets a hard environmental gap with a named material, a defined cycle, and a measurable result. That is the kind of authority survival stories need. Not vague inspiration, but a system tied to conditions, mechanics, and proof. Some people try to solve that weakness by jumping to powered atmospheric water generators, or AW. These systems cool air below its dew point and force condensation, basically acting like large dehumidifiers that make water. And yes, they can work. The source says that in warm, humid conditions, AWGs can produce roughly 2.5 to 5 gallons of water per day for one household. But then comes the cost that changes the entire equation. Those same systems consume about 0.5 to 1 kilowatt-hour of electricity for every quart of water produced. So what did you really solve? You solved one dependency by creating another. You changed water dependence into power dependence. That may still be acceptable in some setups, but if your grid is unstable, your solar array is undersized, your batteries are already stretched, or fuel becomes expensive and hard to secure, then that machine is not pure water independence. It is just another system that now needs protecting. That is why the MIT design is interesting. It tries to hit the dry air problem without dragging a power bill behind it. The source describes the device as roughly the size of a standard window, around 5.5 square feet in total surface area. Inside the enclosure is a specially engineered hydrogel sheet molded into a bubbler-like pattern of small domes. That shape increases surface area, which increases the amount of vapor the material can absorb over time. And the real heart of the system is the material itself. The hydrogel contains lithium chloride, a salt compound with a strong attraction to atmospheric moisture. According to the source, lithium chloride can pull water vapor from air at humidity levels as low as 10%, which is far below the range where fog nets or dew collectors still perform well. That is a real point of authority. A specific material, a specific function, and a specific performance window. But the story gets even more serious when you look at the old failure point. Previous hydrogel systems using similar salts had a major problem. The salt could leach into the collected water, making the output unsafe to drink without extra treatment. And in survival, that kind of flaw is not a technical footnote. It is the whole difference between a useful layer and a dangerous trap. According to the source, the MIT team added glycerol to the gel formulation, stabilizing the salt and preventing it from migrating into the collected water. Field testing then confirmed that the final water stayed well below safe drinking thresholds for salt. That is why this has credibility. It is tied to a specific old failure, with a specific attempt to solve it. So how does the cycle work? At night, temperatures drop and relative humidity rises a little. During that period, the hydrogel absorbs moisture from the surrounding air. Think of that as the loading phase. Then daytime heat reverses the direction. As temperatures rise, the gel warms, contracts, and releases the trapped moisture as vapor into the sealed chamber. The outer surface of the glass enclosure is coated with a radiative cooling polymer, which keeps the glass cooler than the air inside the chamber. When that warmer vapor touches the cooler inner glass surface, it condenses into droplets. Those droplets run down built-in channels at the base and collect as drinkable water. Then the cycle resets and starts again. No electricity, no batteries, no filters, no moving parts, no daily labor beyond placement. Night loads the system. Daylight squeezes the water back out. Gravity still finishes the job, but now we get to the part that matters most. Did it actually work outside the lab? According to the source, yes. The prototype was tested for 1 week in Death Valley under low ambient humidity conditions. During that test period, the device operated through relative humidity levels, ranging from 21 to 88%, and produced between nearly 2 and 5.5 fluid ounces of water per day. The source says it continued producing water at humidity levels where passive harvesting systems stop functioning. This matters not because the output is huge, but because the output remained alive where passive water usually dies. That is exactly where people need to think clearly instead of emotionally, because the second you hear water from desert air, your brain wants to overshoot. It wants to imagine a miracle. It wants to imagine total independence. It wants to skip planning do not. Here is the right way to understand this MIT panel. Not as a full household water solution, as a drinking water layer. That difference is everything. The source says the MIT team estimated that 8 panels of this size could meet the daily drinking water requirements of one adult. Read that carefully. Daily drinking water requirements for one adult. Not bathing, laundry, flushing, dishwashing, or every convenience that modern water use quietly carries. This is why the device matters. And this is also why it has to be framed correctly. A small, reliable layer can be extremely valuable if you assign it the right job. A small, reliable layer becomes dangerous only when you lie to yourself about what job it can carry. So, let's lock in the 3 deadly mistakes. Deadly mistake number 1. Treating a drinking water layer like a whole house water solution. People here pulls water from desert air and immediately scale it up in their heads. They imagine total freedom. No more storage planning, no more rationing, no more backup layers. But survival is not built from one heroic system. It is built from correct layers doing correct jobs. Deadly mistake number 2. Using the wrong system in the wrong climate. Fog harvesting is not obsolete. It is not quick. According to the source, in a compatible humidity coastal environment, a single 3x3 foot fog net panel can collect between 3/4 of a gallon and 2.5 gallons per day, requires no power, no moving parts, very little maintenance, and can be built for under $100 per panel. That is practical, but only if your climate supports it. Every water system wins inside a different environmental window. If you refuse to respect that, you are not building a survival plan. You are collecting comforting ideas. Deadly mistake number 3. Confusing a proof of concept with a ready-to-buy household solution. According to the source, the MIT device is currently a proof concept prototype and is not yet commercially available. The next steps include refining the material for greater yield, faster moisture release, and lower cost, linking multiple harvesters into larger arrays, and testing the design across more climates for long-term durability. That is part of what makes the story credible. Now zoom out. Why does this matter beyond one panel? Because the wider water problem is not shrinking. The source says more than 2 billion people lack regular access to clean, safe drinking water. The crisis claims over 1 million lives each year. 46 million people in the United States face water insecurity, and by 2030, global groundwater demand is projected to exceed supply by 40%. That means this is not a distant abstract. The moment your water delivery becomes unreliable, your well output drops, or treatment becomes questionable, this stops being a world problem and becomes a household problem. So here is the practical takeaway. Watch this MIT direction closely, because it has an authority spine behind it. MIT, a clear mechanism, a fixed old failure point, a Death Valley field test, a defined output, and an honest admission that it is still a prototype. But if you need action right now, match the system to your climate. If you are in a high humidity coastal zone with fog potential, passive fog harvesting remains the more actionable off-grid choice today because it is field proven, cheap to build, low maintenance, and useful now. If you live in very dry air, 10TSM might see still direction matters because it goes after the exact environmental gap older passive systems struggle to survive. Lock in the mindset, correct problem, correct mechanism, correct limits, correct layer. What worries you more? Where you live right now? Not enough water or unsafe water? Tell me your actual conditions too. Humid, coast, dry, inland air, well water, city water, storm outages, seasonal drought. The right water plan is built from conditions that can hurt you. And in the next video, we go after the quieter failure that ruins more backup water than collection itself. Not how to find water, but how to keep it from going bad after you already found it. Because if you get that layer wrong, even a brilliant collector will not save you.